I was at Universal. I don't know if I told you this story. And I'll never forget telling them about the internet and that movies are going to be distributed on the internet. And he made me write a whole presentation on it, like a proposal. And he said, it'll never happen. You're an idiot. I'm a Hollywood exec. I know what's going to happen in the future. Thank you for telling me about the internet, but it's never going to happen.
Welcome to the Culture FYI'RS Podcast. Culture FYI'RS is a creative collaboration meetup held weekly at the FYI Campus in Los Angeles. Each week, we feature a fireside chat with a guest, showcase projects being worked on by members of the FYI community, and share product updates for FYI.AI, the creative collaboration app co-founded by will.i.am and available for free download in the App Store and Google Play. FYI.AI is powered by AI personas like me, Fito. Each week, this podcast showcases conversations held at the Culture FYI'RS event. This week, our guest is Karl Jacob, entrepreneur, former Facebook advisor, and current CEO and founder of LoanSnap. Karl's journey reads like a tech industry roadmap, from a computer engineer at Apple to those early chaotic days at Facebook, working directly with Mark Zuckerberg, to building his own groundbreaking ventures at the intersection of finance and technology. He's also the strategic advisor for USC's Information Sciences Institute, where he is helping to explore the exciting world of quantum technology. In this conversation with FYI Chief Growth Officer Julie Pilat, Karl opens up about the moment he hit a career ceiling at Apple and made the terrifying leap into startup uncertainty. He shares what it was really like in Facebook's early days, far from the Hollywood portrayal in the film The Social Network, including the sacrifices, failures, and moral tensions that came with explosive growth. So whether you're building your first startup, navigating the venture capital world, or simply curious about the human stories behind the tech headlines, this conversation offers rare insights from someone who's been in the room where it happens.
Karl, I'm so excited to talk about the vastness of your career. And today you want to talk about raising money for good, and not for good like forever, but to do well. But first, we talk a little bit about the school's history, because I know there's a documentary coming out and there's so many things people don't know.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody, by the way. And I just got back from giving a talk actually at USC about weak ties and a bunch of researchers saying they don't work. And I was like, wait a second. I know they work, because they've worked in my career for sure. And yours.
And weak ties, you mean like casual association?
Casual, yeah. I mean,
meeting people today.
Yeah, the way I met Chantel was a friend of mine through an event during LA Tech Week that I went to, and she was there.
Oh.
It's about as weak as it gets.
I love weak ties. Yeah. I cast such a wide net.
Exactly.
You could say I need an elephant tomorrow for a video shoot, and I'd be like, I know somebody.
Exactly. So I actually was an engineer at USC. I was a biomedical engineer, then switched to computer science, and I worked at Apple and then Sun Microsystems. But in between there, I worked at this research place called ISI. When I got there, I was like a lowly intern, basically. They call them code monkeys, like you just write code when people still did that. And I remember going to this building in Marina Del Rey and thinking, wow, like this black tower, this is so cool. What do they do here? And one of the people there told me like, oh, well, we built the internet. You got to imagine back then, the government had paid for the entire internet, ARPANET. The government wanted to control everything. Their first idea for email was the government would store all your email for you. What a great service that would have been, right? ISI fought that and won. And email was free for everybody. The other thing they wanted to charge, because the postal department was like, well, we have to charge for the email because we charge for regular mail. And John Postel, who's one of the guys who was one of the early people at ISI, fought that really hard. So email is free, which is really, really good, but we have spam. Oh, well, right? I mean, I think that's a good trade-off. So the history there is pretty amazing from two perspectives. I think the technology is obviously pretty amazing, and we all live on it today. But the other is it was built with heart and trying to do good. And, that's a group of people who were highly incented to not be good, right? They were funded by the government, by the Department of Defense. The original spec for the internet asked for people to go build a network that could withstand a nuclear attack in the United States. And they came up with the internet. And so to me, it was a teaching moment for me. It was like, oh, wow, you can build really cool stuff and do really great things and do good at the same time.
I think it's so interesting that you've been working with the engineering school and there's this rich history of things that's happened with the government.
Yeah.
But you are passionate about bringing creatives into the mix. Why is that?
Well, I've learned a long time ago that the greatest ideas come from creatives. I mean, that sounds like preaching to the choir, but I spent a lot of time early on in my career, as we talked about. I met Will with Ron Conway, who's a Silicon Valley guy, and who had heard me talk a lot about this idea that like we don't have all the ideas. And in fact, we're kind of bad because we actually think a lot about how to make it real way too early. And I spent a bunch of time, I told you the story about Springfield.com that we did for Fox. The last person I met was Matt. And the very first words out of his mouth, this is kind of like a Silicon Valley meets like, creative person moment. He said, "Are you the guy who's going to put all my stuff on the internet and get it stolen?"
Wait, and for those people who don't know casually, who's Matt
Groening, sorry.
Creator of The Simpsons.
Yes. And he said a lot more curse words in that conversation, which was kind of Matt's thing. But it was interesting to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, like here's this guy who I, literally thought was a god. And he's telling me I'm going to steal his stuff and put it on the internet. He hates me.
Yeah.
Right? He literally hated me. And so I spent a bunch of my career trying to merge those two things. And I'm still trying. I was at Universal. I don't know if I told you this story. And I'll never forget telling them about the internet and that movies are going to be distributed on the internet. And he made me write a whole presentation on it, like a proposal. And he said, it'll never happen. You're an idiot. I'm a Hollywood exec. I know what's going to happen in the future. Thank you for telling me about the internet, but it's never going to happen.
That's crazy. But what should people be thinking about? What's like a couple sentence intro to quantum? One of our questions was AI is old school, quantum's the future. Things are changing really fast.
Yeah.
I think the National Science Foundation named 2025 the year of quantum. And I mean, I am not embarrassed to say the first time I started digging in was January 2nd. So it's not too late to jump on board.
I didn't know shit about quantum.
Really?
Right, until I met Haley. And then she told me everything I'd learned, which I thought I knew. I thought I knew about quantum. She's like, yeah, that's all old school, basically. And I think that's the thing. It's not the quantum you've heard about before. Like the quantum we all grew up with or went to school for or studied or whatever is not totally been proven wrong, but a lot of it's been proven wrong. And that's kind of cool thing about science. So it isn't going to touch just computing. It's going to touch communications. It's going to touch sensors. So here's a great example. The government came to us and said, we need better sensors. We need sensors that are not dependent on the GPS network. And one of the researchers said, let me go try to figure that out. So they built a quantum sensor that works without, GPS. It can actually navigate without GPS. It doesn't need input data. Like it naturally knows what north is. And then they're like, well, how does this thing work? So they reverse engineered it that it was actually following the Earth's magnetic fields.
Wow.
Which is
like a compass.
Like a compass, but at the quantum level. So it's really, really sensitive. And then they went one more step, which was really cool, which is they figured out that that's how a lot of animals navigate, including birds.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I just love that quantum is actually everywhere. Quantum is much more tied to nature than compute is.
Yeah.
I mean, nature is quantum. And that's one of the problems that quantum will hopefully approach and hopefully solve, which is how do we predict the weather? How do we map the human body? Quantum is the only chance we have. The human body is way too complicated for us to do it with classical computers. Well, It would take us like 1,000 years or whatever they say.
There were a few things that stuck with me that day, but we're standing around with a bunch of scientists, and one of them kind of said under his breath, we're on the brink of understanding why miracles exist.
Yeah.
I was like, tell me more. And then another was I was asking someone, I said, with as fast as technology is moving, when do you think that some of these major scientific breakthroughs are going to come to fruition? And he said 10 years. And then I asked, with science moving so fast, will that be expedited even past 10 years. And he said 5 years ago, I would have said 25 years.
Yeah, Federico. Yeah, exactly.
I get so excited. Like, where's the...
And he's a pessimist, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
So one of my favorite things is the notion that nobody's just one thing. Like, people could maybe not be really honest, but they might be creative geniuses. You know, Will's a brilliant musician, audio engineer, and also my favorite futurist, right? An entrepreneur. It wasn't always welcomed for us to wear so many hats. What was your path to go from a computer science engineer to I'm officially going to be an entrepreneur and start my own companies, rather working for Apple?
It always seems like it's an easy path, and it's really hard. When I told my mom I was going to leave my company that I was at, which was Apple, she cried. For me, it was two things. One, I kind of hit the ceiling. And two, I wanted to be able to do something bigger. And I just had this feeling, I'm like, wow, I've learned so much, but I can't apply it. I can't do it in this infrastructure. And we're seeing a lot of this happen today where corporations kind of wrap talent up. And I just talked to somebody the other day who wants to fund companies and founders as if they were doing a 360 deal. And I'm like, anybody in this room would say that's a bad word, right? And I would say that's a bad word. That's like, we own your ass for the next, well, who knows how long. And it's a horrible thing to compare yourself to, but he doesn't understand. He thinks that's a good thing. So for me, it was wanting to break free of what I saw, a system that wasn't going to serve the greater good. And, you know, corporations, and this is happening right now in research, right? Corporations think quarter by quarter. And if you look at some of the greater companies, and I could even point to, I'll bring up Facebook because I know people ask me about it. Like, what went wrong? A lot went right, but what went wrong? Well, one was the company got a lot more focused on the next quarter than they did doing good. They lost their souls, effectively. And corporations have cultures, but unfortunately, they also have shareholders. Some are good, but some demand money. And they're very wealthy and big people. And so even the best intended companies, censorship is a terrible thing, I think, and I have thought it for a long time. And the last time I had a hard conversation with Mark was around censorship. And the words were, we have to. I'm like,
which completely talk about doing a 180.
Yes. My mom taught me never to say I told you so, but I'm desperately like trying to restrain myself because it's like, it could only go bad. I didn't know how it was going to go bad. I knew it was going to go bad because you look at history and it's gone bad. Every time censorship is introduced, it gets used by not the people who are, quote, good, but by another group of people. So once those tools are in place, they get used for bad things. There's no way for them to be used for good things in the long run.
So let's quantum time travel a little bit back to, I don't know, what was it, 2005, 2006, 2007?
Don't usually talk about this, but I almost quit a bunch of times. I was like, this is too crazy. It's too much. And intuition of it is a little bit. I think the other was just, I love learning. And it's one of the reasons I like the quantum stuff. For me, that's the goal. How much can you learn? How fast? And just keep learning. Like, just never stop. And I remember my friends were asking me, like, why would you go to Facebook? Like, what do they have that other people don't? I'm like, they've got it right. They figured it out. And just getting back to kind of like the how you start kind of thing, we pitched every VC in the Valley. And we literally got turned down by every venture capitalist in the Valley with the same quote. MySpace has 300 million users. You will never catch them. It just shows you how wrong venture capitalists can be. And also like how the company accelerates versus, where they are.
And in the timeline of history, I just am now selfishly asking this because I can't stop myself. What point did MySpace sell to Fox in the Facebook trajectory? And when did Sheryl Sandberg come to Facebook?
So I think Facebook had just thought about opening up outside of colleges. I think we were pretty much there. And that's a funny thing. That's a great example of how smart Mark really is. So everybody thinks we just open the doors and let everybody in. That's actually not what happened. What happened was we had an experiment. We tried an experiment. We let people come home for, holidays or whatever. And we moved them from their university network into a local network in their city. And what happened then was this intermixing between people at different universities. And then the high school kids found out about it. And it just went like this.
Wow.
And so it wasn't like, hey, everybody come in. And so there's just a lot of things like that in the process that people take for granted now, like the newsfeed. The newsfeed was like the most hated feature the company did. Everybody hated it. Like literally everybody except for Mark.
Interesting. That's interesting. And Sheryl Sandberg?
Oh, Sheryl.
Like 2011, 12?
Yeah. So a lot later, I think, you got to realize like you couldn't ask for more drama in a company, to be honest with you, which is why it made a good movie. When Sean was asked to leave, and I'll just put it that way, it left a huge hole in the company. I'll give you an example of how big the hole was. Sean was a viral genius. Like he used to call it black magic. You just don't know whether it's for good or for evil.
Yeah.
And he was right about that. But when Sean was gone, there was really no business person other than me, and I was just an advisor. But if you think about like what that means, you have to remember what Mark was like. I remember the day when we were talking about doing advertising, and Mark said, "We will do advertising on Facebook over my dead body." And that sounds so stupid to say, right? I mean, I say it like that sounds ridiculous, but that was true. And we did these, like they were like supposed to be like those postings you get in college universities.
Yeah.
On the, like back then, you just pieces of paper like, "Hey, I'll come clean your home," or whatever. And that was the model. That was the advertising model at the time. And we had two big advertisers we can talk about sometime. Our biggest advertisers, oddly enough, in the early days of Facebook were Apple Computer and Victoria's Secret.
Interesting.
And boy, those are very different audiences, to say the least. So I think that...
But so college.
Yeah. I mean, so I'll tell a quick story because I think it talks a lot about, like Sheryl was important because we didn't have a business person per se at the time. And she brought a lot of structure to the company and a lot of ideas. And we can have a long debate about if it was beneficial for the company in the long run or not. But it's a good example of like how everybody thinks everything was great. I mean, imagine, pick your favorite company. Imagine the president of the company, the person responsible for business stuff, is accused of selling drugs and effectively gets put in jail for the night. That's a killing blow. That's pretty bad. I mean, that's one of those things you look at like, well, all right, we're dead.
Seems tame by 2025 standards.
Well, back then it was a big deal. It was a good point, especially this year. But I think what we learned over time was we needed more rigor and more structure around the company because it still was the Facebook of the early days at that time. As a company, you try things. And particularly when you have somebody like Mark, who didn't start out as a great CEO. I mean, he was very shy. I remember him being on the Oprah Winfrey show. I was sitting next to the head of PR, and I turned to her and I said, "He's going to pass out."
Oh, I want to see that interview. I've never seen clips.
Oh, he's sweating like a dog, and it's bad.
That's amazing. Okay, here's the time. I want to remind everybody that they can put questions for Karl in the discussion.
That'll be the good part.
But go ahead, jump in and ask any questions.
FYI is an AI-powered messenger and productivity platform crafted for creatives and their teams. Focus your ideas with your collaborators using an encrypted messenger, develop your vision, utilizing media-rich project tools, and bring those ideas to life by sharing them with the world. With the AI personas in the FYI app serving as your creative co-pilots, you can ask FYI.AI to draft stories, song lyrics, product descriptions, marketing copy, or any written content and see the results within seconds. Download FYI today for free. Now available in the App Store and on Google Play.
I'm curious. So your talk, you wanted to talk about raising money for good. And I think there's a fork there because so many creatives in here, raising money seems daunting, right? Especially when you look at the amounts of money that's raised by women or people of color. Yep. So before we focus on your desire of raising money for good, what's your suggestion or advice or pep talk about how to start raising money for a company?
I guess the first would be find true believers, people who really believe in you and your mission. that's almost palpable for investors to feel, even if they aren't in the target market, which is part of the problem. And part of the problem is, let's be honest, if you go up to the Valley and go to Sand Hill Road, you're pitching a bunch of old white guys. Like that is just fundamentally who you're pitching. And I was trying to explain this earlier in a conversation I was having, is like what entrepreneurs often don't realize is that if their experiences are different than those white guys or anybody in their network, you're really in trouble.
Yeah.
So I think it's having that belief. And I know that sounds crazy, but remember that Facebook was 6 people at one time. Like they were tiny and nobody wanted to give them money. Everybody hated them. And I've been through the same thing. Like that's insane. Actually, I like that because that's kind of like the marker for a good idea. Like the more insane it is, the more, but the problem is it can still fail.
Yeah.
So I think the tip is be passionate about what you're doing. And that usually takes a real belief and like an inner guiding light. It literally takes kind of like this mission. I mean, it took Mark that. Like people wanted to kill Facebook over and over and over again. And he just fundamentally believed. I mean, remember, I was there when they turned down $2 billion from Yahoo. Yeah. I mean, they almost sold that company for $2 billion. And I'll never forget, we went to dinner and they said, check this out. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, oh my gosh, these guys, these kids are going to sell it for sure. And they said, well, what do you think? And I was like, well, I don't know. I'm just your advisor. And they said, well, your job is to tell us what to do. I'm like, no, my job is to give you advice. Your job is to make decisions. And I turned to Mark and I said, hey, do you want to change the world? And he looks at me and goes, yep. I'm like, okay. And I got up and I left. And Sean came running after me. He goes, dude, we're not done with the meeting. You got to come back. I said, no, we are done. You guys aren't going to change the world at Yahoo. No way. Now, I thought it was over. And then the board members, who now say they fought against the deal the whole time, called me and told me what an idiot I was. And that goes 2 ways. I mean, that's one of the topics I talk about a lot. Like, do you want to be rich or do you want to do good? I think you can do both. And often entrepreneurs give up way too early in their mission because people tell them that. Oh, it'll be the only money you'll ever make. And actually the guy at Yahoo, now you know that I was pretty close to it, said to Mark, go home and tell your mom that you turned down $1 billion for your company.
Did she cry like your mom and my mom did?
He never even called her. He didn't give her the chance.
Interesting. So we're going to get to questions in just a second, but I want to go further down that road about raising money for good.
Yeah.
Because again, it's so easy to say, we have this trick up our sleeve. Oh God, right. You guys, I just went through that book, The Chaos Machine. Mm-hmm. It is far more depressing than I ever would have thought. I know that's a big selling point, but it's alarming.
Yeah.
And with companies like FYI, it's difficult because privacy and security is a leading tenet of the company.
Right.
So we're not spying on you. We're not selling your data. We're not spamming you. You're the only ones that have the encryption key, which is kind of important now.
Yeah.
The FBI is talking about everybody should be on an encrypted messenger.
Yep.
And some people have Meta on iPhone. If you're texting an Android, that's not encryption.
Right.
So off of principle, FYI could be a really good bet, a safe bet. But we're standing by our principles, and that's an element of wanting to do good. It's very different when you're talking to advertisers and saying, here's how I can wind this up. Here's how I can get viral. Here's how I can have the biggest growth, the most views. So what does raising money for good look like in your career?
Well, I think it's desperately trying to cling to those beliefs when people are throwing tons of money at you. Advertising is a good example, right? And I was telling a story earlier about the news feed at Facebook, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, it keeps you in a bubble and does all these terrible things and everything like that. It actually came from a really good place and trying to stick to the core values. The core value was basically help people connect with other people. Let's say you have 100 friends. Let's say each one of them posts a picture, 2 pictures a day. That's lots and lots of content. How do you figure out what content to show in a newsfeed? The answer is pretty simple. You build an AI to pick the thing that person wants the most. And then it got, usurped. And so every day you'll be asked questions and challenged, and the dollars will get bigger and bigger. And they kind of like work against each other a little bit. Like movies are the same way. Like, I got to work with a lot of people in the movie industry, and it was fascinating to hear the conversations between the executives in the studio and quote the talent. And it usually revolved around, hey, we have the money, we're doing the distribution, you will do the ending this way, which is why we ended up with a director's cut. And so companies are a lot the same way. Like you'll get pushed and you think it's over. You think, oh, well, we won that battle at Facebook. It was the battle between staying in colleges and not. Then the battle was advertising or not. Then the battle was platform or not. And so you could argue that platform was a big turning point for the company culturally, because you opened up to a lot more people and opened up the ability for something like Cambridge Analytica to have it. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it was great for a bunch of app developers, including Zynga, who my friend Markus Nielsen-Kolding ran. But long-term, was it the good thing for Facebook itself? And then what you realize, and I think this is an important thing, is your company gets bigger and bigger. All great companies, all big companies are a reflection of society, as a friend of mine would say. He said the problem is society is not very pretty. And I think Facebook is a good example of that. Like we connected a lot of people and we became a mirror society in many ways, and society's not very pretty. And we just allowed a lot of people who you would argue are not very pretty, moral, whatever, to have big megaphones.
Interesting. So in a second, I'm going to have you circle back on quantum. First, we talk about weak ties. It's really awesome. We're all connected here in the FYI project. So if we don't get to all the questions right now, you all are connected to the first advisor at Facebook and somebody who wants to raise money for good. And do you think you'd jump into the project and answer the questions we don't get to?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Here's what I've got. How do you know when you're ready to scale from a one-person company? How do you go about building a dedicated and functional team?
Oh, the AI is just going to do all of it. It can be a one-person billionaire, right? That's what everybody says. I think it's different for every company. I think one of the most important things is to think about profitability, because you control your own destiny. And VCs will always try to convince you to scale early. Why do they do that? Well, you take more of their money, they get a bigger piece of the company, and it's like rocket fuel. It'll be great. So I think it really depends. And I'm sorry not to answer it. Like here, there's a formula, but I find a lot of that. Like at ISI, there's a lot of people like, well, what's the formula? And I'm always like, well, it's not a formula. Like somebody's saying, well, there's a difference between weak ties and strong ties. I'm like, no, it's a continuum, and you move along that continuum. I think for startups, it's one of those things you hear a lot. Like you'll know it when you see it. Like when real traction is unbelievable. Like here's an example. When I talked to Mark, he told me that people were spending 20 minutes a day on the site. And I thought, that's insane. At the time, people were spending like 20 seconds on Yahoo. Like that was just unheard of. 20 minutes. I didn't believe him. And I made him tail the server logs and show me the actual activity because I didn't believe him. That was real traction. Like when it really happens and it really works, you see it in the numbers, and there's no advertising campaign. There's no kind of external force that's acting on the system. It's actually replicating itself on its own.
So Nerea said, speaking of money for good, do you have advice for funding when it's a nonprofit entity? Something that investors won't offer direct financial return on the investment. And then what I want to wedge in is you and I were talking about how it's really an interesting time for universities.
Yeah, that's a real tough one, right? I mean, I think universities are about to find out what it really means to be a nonprofit. I do think there's a shift happening in the Valley. I mean, the Valley is pretty dense. I mean, and pretty fixated on the latest thing, or lemmings, or whatever you want to call them. And for-profit used to be the only way to build a company. Mm-hmm. I think we're learning that that's not the case anymore. So I think nonprofits, especially now, oddly enough, have a much better chance of being successful than they did before. How you distribute stuff is hard to say, but I think what we're seeing going on in the government is a massive pullback from the government, which was a big funder of nonprofits. Massive,
yeah,
right?
And research.
And so I think what happens, well, for a while, everybody freaks out. But then eventually somebody comes in and fills that gap, and that gap's usually startups. And if you listen to Ben Horowitz and Mark Andreessen and some of their podcasts, they're like, they're literally talking about funding nonprofits. I haven't heard that out of a VC in, ever. Right. So I think hopefully times are changing.
That's amazing. That's good news. I was surprised to hear you say that. Switching lanes, again, we're going to put you to work. You have lots of questions to answer in the discussion. You are such a great champion of Haley Weinstein, and you would say some things about her and brag about her that she probably wouldn't say about herself, right?
Probably
and
true.
When I got invited to the quantum computer at USC and I started asking Finn in FYI, I'm going to visit a quantum computer. What do I need to know? What should I think about? What questions should I ask? How can I maximize this experience? How could it impact my work? It was really helpful. But you talked about how amazing Haley is and how accessible she was. And will you talk a little bit about how you found her and champion some of the work she's doing? Because like I said...
Well, the truth is she kind of found me through Federico, if she remembers correctly. It's pretty rare when you've done a lot of stuff that somebody surprises you. And, my experience there was I thought I knew quantum. I learned it in college. I studied it. It was my favorite class, quantum mechanics, because I sucked at, Newtonian mechanics. And I remember my first conversation with Haley, and I'm like, well, here's what I think about the quantum world and what you're talking about. She's like, yeah, you need to go read. Like literally, like you don't know what you're talking about. And I thought, man, all right. So I went and read the papers and I'm like, holy crap. Like she's right. Like all the stuff. And that's the cool thing about quantum. Even the stuff that we're talking to Will about, like that he believed was true isn't true. And that's the weird thing that where you're on a cusp of a great innovation, where even the science is being rewritten as we're happening. So I'll give you an example, and Haley, correct me if I'm wrong, but if this quantum entanglement thing really is a thing, if it's true, which many people believe, when we actually do something where, one particle changes in thousands of miles away or millions or light years or whatever away, another particle changes, one of two things are going to happen. Either it's going to work or it's not going to work. If it does work, it means a bunch of stuff we believe about time is wrong. Mm-hmm. Because these things can actually be entangled across large distances that should take time to travel, but it doesn't. So one or the other is going to fall. So I think like that, the other is she has that like spirit of like, I believe in what I believe and I'm not going to let anybody tell me different. She tells a great story, which I'm going to embarrass you, sorry, which is, she was at SpaceX, arguably the most forward-looking, incredible company. They're going to Mars and all that stuff. And she pitched her idea to some head person that she knows the name of and said, this is what I think we should do. And that person turned her down and said, that idea is too crazy for SpaceX. And so she came to USC and ISI.
And has already done it.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing is like that's the spirit it takes, where even the smartest people, the vice president of whatever can tell you at an Elon Musk company, you're crazy, it can't happen. And she's like, oh, all right, I'll go somewhere else.
Yeah. Thanks, Karl. Make some noise for Karl.
Thanks for listening to the Culture FYI'RS Podcast. Make sure to download the FYI app, available now in the App Store and Google Play. Check out this episode's notes for a project link to this Culture FYI'RS event, including a look at more projects from the FYI community. This episode's Culture FYI'RS event was produced by FYI co-founder will.i.am, Aminah Muhammad, Emily Choi, Frankie Sandoval, Giuliana Rodriguez, Jafet Chavez, Julie Pilat, Lilly Kam, Markus Nielsen-Kolding, Roneal Madlani, Kantrowitz, Shania Jafari, Taylor Weng, the FYI Product Team, and of course the FYI Community. The podcast is edited by Rob Van Vranken. Make sure to subscribe to Culture FYI'RS wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode. Learn more about FYI by visiting FYI.FYI.